broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello and welcome to another episode of WilmsFront. This is episode 3. It is Friday, the 20th of September 2019. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are broadcasting live on the Tim Wilms YouTube channel, and of course we have the live chat here on YouTube, so you can participate and tell us your thoughts throughout the show. I see a few of our regulars already there, so thank you for joining us on a Friday night. We'll finish probably just in time for the footy finals, which are on tonight, so we're starting at 7 and making sure that you can get on with the rest of your Friday night. All right, and as I've been promoting, my guest tonight is Liam Kwasha, who is from is probably the most prominent member of the Young Conservatives Queensland, which I would describe as an educational Facebook page where they publish very professionally produced videos on conservative values and activism. So they do a great job. They've been around for, I'd say, a couple of years now. So obviously it's made up of young people who are busy studying or pursuing various career options, but it's when they do post, it's pretty good material. But I start every show, as always, by giving you the rundown about what's in the news cycle tonight. Now, I'll start with probably the Australian news story of the week has been that Pauline Hanson was able to gain from the Morrison government a inquiry or review into the family law courts, and it's going to be chaired by Liberal backbencher Kevin Andrews. He's a former Howard and Abbott government minister, and Pauline Hanson is going to be vice chair. It's a joint committee, which means it's House and Senate, and it's quite outraged the feminists and the left, who, well, they say it's going to be a men's rights, father's rights fest, and they haven't liked that Pauline Hanson has said that some women lie in the family court to gain custody, and so there's been a lot of, well, mainly Guardian articles about it this week. And I think I saw an article a day about a woman who was accused of lying in the family court even though she was telling the truth. But this is the thing, everyone lies, and the family court is a very emotionally charged environment, and so a review to make sure that lies aren't believed and can't basically destroy men and women's lives. I think that it's a good thing to have that. So we don't want fathers to be denied access to their children until they're 18 because the mother is being uncooperative. But yes, of course, if a woman's coming out of an abusive relationship, then that needs to her safety needs to be accommodated as well. It seems to me that it's a back and forth between the men's rights and the women's rights, and obviously the feminists, it's always that women are the victims, and then you've probably got the more radical men's rights activists who said, like, it's men that are always the victims. I definitely think the family court system is biased against men's and fathers, and hopefully this review can help us to get to a more appropriate balance and make sure that there is no bias, because our judiciary shouldn't be biased. All right, so it was the climate strikes today. It was originally just going to be school children who were encouraged to strike worldwide for the climate emergency. A lot of the schools allowed the children to use the crude term WAG school, and a lot of children did take that opportunity. There were, I will concede, large crowds in Melbourne and Sydney, and also it wasn't just school children, it was also a lot of employers gave a day off to their workers to protest for climate action, and even some councils granted their council workers the day off that they could attend the climate strike. And there's all these journalists and sympathetic activists said, look at this people power, look how many people there are. Well, yeah, there's a lot of people, but remember we had an election on May 18th, and in a democracy, it's what people vote on a ballot paper that decides whether we want to take climate action or not, or whether it's an important issue for us. So Australia made their decision on May 18th. They wanted, the polls say that Australians want some form of climate action, but they prefer the rational approach of the Morrison government rather than the economic vandalism and industrial desecration that the Labor-Greens alliance would have brought in. So this is basically all of these climate strikes, these Extinction Rebellion rallies. They're basically a big whinge because they lost the election, and that's all they can do is just scream as loud as they can. Yesterday we had the 2018-19 budget figures were released by the Australian government. Now, this is the final budget figures because that financial year is over. So it's a $690 million deficit for that financial year, which is, we nearly had a balanced budget, which was actually projected to be around about a $4 billion deficit. So the government is on track to reach its $7.1 billion surplus. It could be more. However, unemployment has risen from 4.9% back in February to 5.3% in this September quarter. So that is not a good thing, and that'll probably inspire the Morrison government to pursue its drug testing trial of welfare recipients, and also to roll out the cashless welfare card to more locations around Australia. And of course, well, I've been watching a lot of Sky News this week, and so Donald Trump is holding a state dinner for Scott Morrison at the White House. So Paul Murray and Laura Jays, they've been over in Washington, D.C. all week because it's only the second state dinner that Donald Trump has granted during his presidency. And well, the other one was French President Emmanuel Macron, which they say it's a distinguished honor, but I don't know, does that mean that because Macron was the first that Trump thinks that Macron is the best world leader? I hardly think so. But it's the first state dinner that an Australian Prime Minister has received since John Howard and went to the White House under George W. Bush in 2006. So Obama, even though a lot of people in Australia loved him, he snubbed Australia, and Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull. He had 4 Australian Prime Ministers during his presidency. None of them got state dinners. So much for our ANZUS alliance, Barack Obama. All right, and yes, the most hilarious scandal over the past 24 hours have been Canadian Prime Minister, the woke SJW world leader, Justin Trudeau. Now, we talked about this on the Uncockables last night. There was just one blackface, or it was actually brownface. He was at an Arabian Nights party in 2001 at the school where he was a teacher. There's been 2 more incidences of blackface that have surfaced in the last 24 hours. It was Time magazine in the United States that broke this, and it was interesting that it was a US publication, not a Canadian one. And now basically everyone's gone digging for other, because Justin Trudeau said there might be other images. And so, well, of course, everyone's kept digging there. And, well, let's have a look at the compilation there. So that's the first one, the Arabian Nights. The one on the left, that was from a talent show that he performed at. And then the third one is actually a video. Global News broke that, where, well, he looks, he's completely black there, and if you watch the actual video, he's running around, he's being very goofy. And so Justin Trudeau, he said in a press conference today that he didn't fully recognize the white privilege that he had, which is basically saying, oh, it's not my mistake, it's that, we live in a white privileged society, basically passing his mistakes off to the rest of us. And of course, he's been given a pass by most liberal progressives in Canada and the United States because he said it was racist and he should have known better, and he now knows how horrible and offensive it is. And this is dropped right in the middle of the Canadian election campaign, because Justin Trudeau has called an election and his government's in a bit of trouble because there's a corruption scandal that's besieged his government. He wanted the Attorney General of Canada to intervene in a bribery case that was being brought against a government contractor, because he didn't want this contractor to be banned from bidding for government contracts in the future, which, if you've done the crime, you do the time. I don't know what was so special about this particular contractor. So yeah, Justin Trudeau's had a horror start to the campaign if his government wasn't already in disarray. And I'll give you an update on the New South Wales abortion decriminalisation bill, because there was the attempted spill against Gladys Berejiklian on Tuesday morning. It didn't go ahead, but debates proceeded in the upper house, and Right to Life New South Wales, who basically this bill was sprung on surprise on the people of New South Wales, and the pro-life activists in New South Wales, they've been able to mobilise incredibly just in a short time. They had a rally just last Sunday with 10,000 people there, which was quite impressive, and it was a much more humane and civilised demonstration than the pro-abortion rally that had taken place the day before. So Right to Life have put a compilation together of all the amendments through the upper house. So we've got government will create guidelines to prevent sex-selective abortions. That passed. Information will be provided to women prior to disability-selective abortion, failed. Full conscience rights for doctors, failed, which means they have to refer a patient on for an abortion. There was an amendment to prohibit sex-selective abortions. That's failed. So obviously up here, there's just guidelines. Women must be offered counselling after 22 weeks. If they're considering abortion after 22 weeks, that passed. Healthcare for babies born alive during an abortion, that passed. Restrictions on late-term abortion, that failed. Refer to a woman who is pregnant, that failed. So that basically means, because you know how men can get pregnant now, so you can't say that just women get pregnant now. People get pregnant. Which is obviously a trans woman was once a woman and has kept their reproductive organs. But yeah, of course, that has to be in the legislation. And just broken today is that the government, or the Parliament of Indonesia, they're looking to pass a law which will ban sex outside of marriage throughout the whole country, and you could end up 6 months imprisonment, because there's been a real Islamization of Indonesia. The province of Aceh up north practices Sharia law. Now, a lot of Australians go to Bali for a holiday, and Bali is part of Indonesia, even though Bali, it's not a Muslim island, it's actually Hindu. So even though that it's a Hindu island, it's still going to be governed by this Islamic-inspired law. It was called a bonking ban. Somebody suggested that, is Malcolm Turnbull advising the government of Indonesia to spread his bonking ban? But this, because I've always thought about this, that because we helped liberate East Timor in 1999 to become independent from Indonesia, and well, at the moment we're doing a pretty crap job of protecting the rights of the people in West Papua, which is part of Indonesia. There's the West Papuan independence movement. There's been a lot of talk that we're too scared to stand up to China. We're also too scared to stand up to Indonesia, it seems, as well. I definitely would like to see Australia help facilitate a Balinese independence movement, because, as I said, it's a Hindu island, and I think that Hindu people, they shouldn't have Islamic law forced upon them. So that's something which is obviously going to affect Australian tourism to Bali. We'll see if this law actually passes, because it's just before the Parliament left. I can see Liam, I've got him on the line already. So I'll just transition to him now. So Liam has done most of the... Hang on, we can hear you now, Liam. I've just got to do the transition. Yeah, this is the transition that I have to make. All right, I'll see if I've done it. Ah, yes, I got it all right. How are you, Liam?
Good, thanks. How are you, Tim?
Yeah, I'm good. And now, this is how I've decided I'm going to do the shows now, rather than call the guests after I've done my introduction. I'll just have you, or sit. Basically, you're in some sort of green room for the first 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
But it means that our audience doesn't have to hear the Skype call music, because I've tried to figure out a way to mute it, but I haven't been able to, so they hear this loud Skype ringtone.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough of the small talk. Let's get into, because as I said in my introduction, Young Conservative Queensland, it's like, obviously it's some people would say it's a niche page, but you're pretty proactive you haven't just done videos, you've also been out and about at schoolies. That was sort of a short documentary that you did. I'll first get you to explain what Young Conservatives Queensland is.
Sure. Well, we were essentially a formation of the Australian Conservatives of Corey Bernardi's party, but we were never officially a part of it, and we acted quite autonomous during the year and a half we've been around. So we were able to host events by ourselves and have both Liberal politicians, LNP, and other parties come to our events. And then during the election, we were very pro-Australian Conservatives and all helped out during the election. And since that time, since the party's been disbanded, we're still around. And we're looking at becoming a network for Conservatives. So it doesn't matter what party you are, we're going to be that network and that social group that can kind of unite Conservatives in terms of elections and other activities.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need all over the country. But yeah, as I said, your page was very active, and even though Corey Bernardi, he's now deregistering Australian Conservatives, it hasn't by any means basically meant the death of your page. And it's often talked about that Conservatives, there needs to be networks, organisations, ways to meet people and also learn how to be activists. And so yeah, I think that up in Queensland you're making a great start.
Yeah, it's not. We get a lot of messages on the page, and it's quite a common one we keep getting. Is these people keep coming to us, these young people who have started calling themselves conservative to their friends and their family, and they get completely shut out because their friends and family tend to be left-leaning, and then they find themselves with no friend and no group to go to. So they message us and they come to us, and they kind of start to find that and start making friends and how to actually get involved in politics as well. So it's quite good what we're doing.
Now, one of the topics that I wanted to explore with you is what does it mean to be young conservative in the current year? Because we're living in as I said in my introduction, the woke social justice warrior age, and so many definitions are changing, and so conservatism has, I'd say, evolved over the past 20 years. I'm a bit older than you, so I've sort of seen the evolution of conservatism. To give the audience a bit of introduction to your work, I'm just going to play the Queensland Young Conservatives core values, which you set out in one of the videos. It only goes for 2 minutes, but I think that it'll be a good introduction to see just your work, and then afterwards we can go into a bit more discussion about those values.
Sure.
Hi everyone, it's Liam from Young Conservatives Queensland, and today I want to talk about what our core values are within the group. They come down to 5 core values, which are very similar to what the Australian Conservatives were, and they are limited government, personal responsibility, free enterprise, strong family values, and freedom of speech, association, and religion. Our first core value is limited government. We believe that the government should be the smallest size possible in order for the people and the citizens to have the most amount of liberty possible. It should be down to the bare essentials of law and order and defence and interaction with foreign governments, where freedom inside the country can flourish properly. Their big government and bureaucracy, on the other hand, has always led to tyranny. Our second core value is personal responsibility. We believe that the individual is ultimately responsible for their own actions. We are very against the victimhood mentality and blaming others for one's own fault. We are against the nanny state, and we believe that the government should treat its citizens as adults. Our third core value is free enterprise. We believe that the free market system is the most efficient economic structure in the world and provides the best chance for people to create wealth for themselves. It teaches the more one puts out, the more that they can earn back, compared to other systems that teaches dependency on the state. Our fourth core value is family. We believe that a solid family structure provides the best and greatest upbringing for children. We celebrate the unique roles that fathers and mothers have when raising children. And we believe that the family is a solid foundation for modern society. Our fifth core value is freedom of speech, religion and association. We believe that people should be able to say what they want without fear of government or societal censorship, because speech is subjective. What may offend one person may not offend the other, and if we start bringing in censorship, it is a dangerous path towards tyranny, because we have to ask the question, who decides what to censor? People should be able to practice whatever religion they want and form whatever clubs and societies they desire, as long as they are not practicing or promoting violence. So there you have it, everyone. There are core values. We'll be writing them up and putting them on our website in the coming weeks, so you'll be able to see them outside of this video. And in the next few weeks as well, we're going to be doing a new video segment, which is going to be called Quash Thought, which is a play on my last name, which is Kwasha, and it's essentially my opinions and solutions to current world events that I see. And that's due to my background in the military, immigration, and what I'm studying at university at the moment, international relations.
And at the end there, are you able to just... You were able to control that background noise for a bit. You got it right there.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's just a bit. Oh, I don't know what you've done. That's worse. That's worse. So go the other way. Go the other way.
Yep.
Ah, yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the end of that video there, you also gave a brief biography of yourself. Now you're 25?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you've already done a lot in life. You've been in the military, done immigration work, and now you're studying. So in such a such a young life, you've already done so much. A lot of 25-year-olds wouldn't have that worldly experience.
Yeah, and it's definitely fine, especially at uni, where a lot of the people are younger and they're not as mature compared to people who do come in later, especially in the military, where you get a lot of that life experience and skills to take that into later life. So it's worked out well and helped me along with my studies as well.
And I'm following the live chat, and yeah, everyone, the immediate reaction to you has been all positive. I don't mean to sort of like diminish the seriousness of this show, but there's been a lot of comments that have like said Chad in response to seeing you on camera.
Yes, I saw some of them.
Now, going back to the conservative values, now it seems to me the way that I interpreted how I saw that video is that modern conservatives, young conservatives these days are basically libertarians, but they have more, they place importance on community values, and basically they want a firm grounding for society, not a free-for-all.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, those core values are values that essentially don't change compared to other values which are up for debate and everything. But we are quite classical and liberalism and libertarian in the sense of how the economy works, and we get a lot of conservative values in terms of how society works, and that's when you see the family values and personal responsibility and such.
And like obviously, as I mentioned, I'm a bit older than you, so I've seen the definition of conservative change. I was a teenager like during the early 2000s, where it was social conservatism. That was really the core value, and like sexual restraint that was pushed quite a bit. Like young people were encouraged to wear purity rings, and like that sort of thing. There was a lot more grounding in sort of like morality, well, not just like morality as like just a brief general principle, but serious restraint And obviously, like, we saw a few years later, there were all these sort of like sex scandals. Like, well, it's happening today there, the hypocrisy angle with, you know, I just spoke about in the introduction, Justin Trudeau, like the progressives are the new hypocrites because they don't live what they preach. So
Yeah.
obviously in 2019 we have things like same-sex marriage. We actually see probably the feminists, they're the anti-sex people these days. So in terms of, like, when you say family values and personal responsibility, what, because they're the sort of the differentiation ones, like, what do they mean to you?
Well, personal responsibility is we see the individual is ultimately responsible for their own actions, and we are against the victimhood mentality and blaming others for our own faults. Where family values, on the other hand, is a strong, solid family structure, which we see as the best chance for the upbringing of children. So the classic example is the nuclear family model.
And obviously, there's a lot of talk about modern families, and if you're for family values or traditional, for example, when Cory Bernardi published his Conservative Revolution, he was accused of diminishing modern families, and this is sort of something that conservatives have struggled with. This, I wouldn't say struggled with, but like adapting to, because like modernity has just warped into this. And obviously there are excesses of it, but there's sort of certain aspects of it that, you know, need to be accommodated.
Yeah, there is this new type of family structure developing, but especially in Australia, there's that long, solid family structure that has been the nuclear family in the past. So this changes has been coming due to the progressive values, and it's diminishing the family structure that has worked so well before. And so we feel that maintaining that structure is the best chance to start branching out in other values.
I would say that probably the social value that has, to this day, has been non-negotiable for conservatives is that of valuing human life. And we've seen that obviously with the pro-life activism in New South Wales. Unfortunately, in Queensland, your Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk and her Deputy Commissar Jackie Trad forced through abortion law reform in that state. It was a shame that there was not a greater fight, even though a lot of the LNP voted against it. But it seems that I would say that Young Conservatives, that is probably a core value that I think everyone would say a conservative should share, that you shouldn't kill the vulnerable, whether they're like a fetus, to use that term, because you know, a fetus, it's still, you know, you can see human in it, and also the elderly as well, because we're seeing euthanasia. It's been legalized in the state of Victoria. There's a push for it in Western Australia. Basically, a part of the progressive agenda has been the dehumanization of, well, as the word says, humanity. And so that is sort of something which I think conservatives have always valued.
It is, yeah, and that's one of our values that we are very strong on as well, very pro-life. And especially in one of the interviews I did in our segment 4 Fast Questions last year, I interviewed Wendy Francis, who was one of the main advocates for pro-life and tried to fight the Labor Party against the bill that passed in Queensland. And what she was telling me was during that process was that Labor weren't meeting them regularly to go through the bill and talk about the process. They kept delaying when they were meeting and doing all these inconsistencies in terms of making the bill pass, as we see a lot in New South Wales. But we do tell people who want to get involved with Young Conservatives, especially with our core values, that there are certain values outside of the core values and issues that we are very strong on, such as pro-life and euthanasia and everything like that. And we believe that Conservatives do tend to be pro-life in that regard.
Another one of your values is free speech and religion and association. Now, this is probably the conundrum of our time. I'm a free speech absolutist, so you can say anything as long as it's not an incitement to immediate violence. That's how I see it. But of course, we're seeing all these hate speech laws that are passing throughout the West, there's a proposal in the state of Victoria to extend hate speech provisions, and Conservatives have, for the most part, they're pretty strong in it. But I'm not sure if you're religious, are you?
No, I did grow up in Christianity and I went to an Anglican school, but I do understand the importance that Christianity has in Western culture, and I like Christian values. But currently, I consider myself a Stoic, and with Stoicism, which has very similar values to Christianity, but it places more emphasis on the self. And that's what Young Conservatives are. We understand that connection Christianity has with Western values, especially Australian values, and we do express that.
Because this is where I think Conservatives have sort of struggled a bit, because there was, I think, we're seen in the UK, like obviously with the public voting for Brexit, and you've seen the Remainers that like chucked the biggest tantrum we've ever seen and trying to block it every step of the way. And this might be unpopular for me to say, but I think there was a bit of hysteria like in the Christian community over them losing that same-sex marriage vote. Like, for example, there was a vigilante who painted over a mural which was deemed offensive to Christians because it mocked Tony Abbott and George Pell, and we've seen the push for a religious discrimination act, which I've very much opposed, because I don't want to go back to the days of blasphemy laws. And I think Christians have to be aware that they shouldn't become snowflakes either, because like, for example, today, like Kyle Sandilands, he's in trouble because he's made some disparaging remarks about the Virgin Mary, and a lot of Christians have complained, even some Muslims have complained, and some people have been saying he wouldn't say that about Muhammad, for example, which I'm kind of over that sort of, like, you wouldn't say that about Muhammad, because it's like, as I said, I'm a free speech absolutist. Like, you can mock or ridicule what you want to do, and yeah, like, there's atheist bigots in the community, and the way that I see it, obviously Kyle Sandilands, he's a shock jock, like, he's after attention. Don't take the bait. I have the same attitude with someone like Catherine Devaney, who calls Anzac Day bogan Halloween, says our farmers get special treatment. Like, we should not get triggered and act like snowflakes ourselves. We should be consistent. Well, I may find that personally offensive, but it's still free speech, and, you know, I'll just ignore them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, speech should be absolute. You'd be able to say whatever you want without fear of government or societal censorship. And I kind of follow Stephen Crowder and what he says in this, that you should be able to say what you want. And the only line is when it's an action. When you call an action on someone, call the violence and everything, that's when you say that's not free speech. Where you should be able to, in terms of free speech, you should be say what you want without fear of being censored whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that's, you agree with me, and yeah, I just want to make the point, like, use this platform to emphasize that Conservatives, they've got to not get sort of caught up in the culture wars where they're too reactionary, and that's why I think it's good that you did that video of core principles, because if you don't have core principles and you're just in a culture war day to day, then it's easy to fall into the hypocrisy, double standard path.
It is, and then you can also turn out like parties like the LNP and Labor, where you get two different factions that essentially destroy the party and they get nothing done. There's the Conservative faction and the LNP and the moderates try to gain power, and it's just all political infighting and not stability to try and go forward in the country. It does become an issue where we have these core values that are the uniting values, when then you can have other issues which you can debate about, but you need core principles to be able to go forward.
And also, one of your values is the free market. So you're a supporter of capitalism, as am I, but the free market, it's starting to fall out of favour with many who would say they're on the right. For example, Trump ran on a platform and was elected president, promising to roll back free trade. He's obviously wanting to make sure that offshoring doesn't continue to happen, like offering some would call them incentives for companies to remain their operations in the United States. Some would call it a strong arm him. Even though Trump's a businessman, he's certainly using government in the market. And I think probably the best reflection of sort of this change from I guess free market conservatism to what's called nationalist conservatism is Tucker Carlson, where he talks about how, because that's another thing, there's a lot of rage against these corporations these days who are engaging in what's called corporate virtue signaling, go woke, go broke. And we've seen actually Business Council of Australia this week saying, we need to tone this down. So a lot of right-wingers are angry at the corporations, which used to be like the left is, the corporations, but it's coming from the right these days. And like, certainly a corporation it's a person, so that's how it's classified in law. So it can still do, like, as long as it's within the laws, it can support these causes if they want. But I'm sure you'll agree with me that we don't live in what's termed cowboy capitalism, complete free market, because there's so much interventions that protect monopolies and make startups so difficult.
It is, yeah. And that's a thing that keeps happening, and you'll see that the left tend to agree with it as well. It's corporatism, where they see big business working with government, where true capitalism is limited government and limited government interference in the economy. But you do need some government interference to prevent things like monopolies forming, and we can see that with Facebook and Google become these giant monopolies with little regulation. But if you come back to that capitalist sense of small business is what we tend to push for as well.
And we've seen a few corporations actually defy the trend. In your home state of Queensland, there was the SCD America Vehicles, where it's actually been taken down now, but the operator of that, Eddie Kawa, released a remix of Peter Dutton's Visit, calling him the baddest MP. And and when I was researching his company, he did a promotional video for Peter Dutton's campaign, but the aftermath of that was pretty intense, but with the abuse that they received. But it's basically, if you research that, it's all like it's basically the same template coming from, like, you may get 1,000 emails, but coming from, like, if you do sort of the digital footprint, probably comes from about 20 people.
Yeah. It is interesting as well. And I saw it as well with this corporate virtue signaling when I did my social media as elective in last semester. And a lot of the people, they love the idea of corporations jumping on certain values, which is an issue because values are subjective in terms of when these companies keep going for progressive values, and they do tend to lose money as well. But it's also interesting seeing stuff like that with Dutton.
Now, I'll give another chat update, because in this show it's always important to acknowledge the live audience and interact with it, because often the live chat is half the show in these live productions. There's a lot of what I described as nationalist conservatives in there, not liking what we are saying, which is fine. But obviously, you and I are not saying the status quo is fine, which I think especially a lot of the libertarians make, saying that the free market as it is fine. It's not a complete free market. We definitely agree there needs to be a reform, but obviously the national conservatives have other things in mind.
Yeah, indeed.
Now, I want to go back to your home state of Queensland, because it's, to use the word, it's a diverse state, and there is more and more of the state's population is being concentrated in the southeast. Brisbane and the Gold Coast. You're on the Gold Coast, which is, well, it's a safe LNP area, but it's a tourist area. So even though there's a lot of elderly people who live in the retirement places, it's pretty youthful a lot of the time.
Yeah, it is. I think I read somewhere that it's the city with the most restaurants per capita in the world, which is always interesting. There's always places to go. And if you do get bored, you just go up to Brisbane. But it is a bit difficult in terms of politics, where that's where a lot of the progressives are. It tends to be in the cities, where if you go out into the country, and especially up in North Queensland, you'll find more conservative following up there.
And I've already made some disparaging comments about your Premier and Deputy Premier, and I basically see the pair of them as almost a clone copy of what we have down here in Victoria with Daniel Andrews. Because Queensland only has a unicameral parliament, one chamber of parliament, which means whichever party wins the majority, they can just pass whatever they want. There's no Senate, upper house to basically amend things, water down things. So, yeah, the Labor government can do whatever they want. And in Brisbane, we've covered it a lot on the Unshackled. There is quite the green left Antifa Marxist hub in Brisbane, which is West End, and that falls within Jackie Tradd's electorate, who is the Deputy Premier. And so you've basically seen Brisbane shut down multiple times with these Extinction Rebellion climate protesters, still wanting to stop the Adani coal mine in central Queensland, which the Queensland voters during the federal election overwhelmingly voted for. Now the Labor Party has no seats north of Brisbane, and she's basically had to be dragged kicking and screaming to actually pass stricter laws, basically to stop these people or deter them from gluing themselves to the road. And well, they've put canoes on the road. They've just basically tried to be disruptive as possible.
Yeah, it is. It'll be interesting to see how the election goes for them, because she's obviously seen what happened in the federal election and is concerned about what's going to happen next year for her in the Queensland election. And if these protests continue, it's not going to work in her favour, and we'll probably most likely see LNP gain some seats, because it's hard for small parties and more conservative parties, especially when there's no Senate to gain seats. So unless the party is well funded, has a good movement, a good set of values, then it's going to be extremely difficult to get into the Queensland Parliament. So it's really going to be between LNP and Labor at the moment, unless you go up north where there's Katter's party as well.
Yeah, that's what I call, it's basically the North Queensland party, which we'll get to in a moment. Now, the LNP opposition leader, Deb Frecklington, her electorate's in the Darling Downs, which is in the southwest of the state, which is old Joe Bjelke-Petersen country, the fiercely conservative national premier who ruled the state for 20 years, to put it in a sort of neutral term. And like I see her on Sky News all the time. She does seem a genuinely principled conservative lady. Is that the impression that you get? Do you know who she is a bit more than probably us outsiders?
Not too much. She hasn't really come up over our end, but yeah, she probably does come up a bit conservative. We don't tend to see it, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
And the key question is, if Anastasia Palaszczuk wants to remain Premier, she's got to somehow shaft Jackie Tradd, who she seems to be some sort of what's the polite way to say it? She's an enforcer. She's basically one of those Labor hard, really like gruff ones, and so it seems that she's going to have to be blasted out of her position. And as I said, her voting base is Antifa.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see if they keep it on board and how well they do in the election, and especially if they do use groups like Antifa during the election, they'll definitely use Get Up in terms of their seats. So it'll be very interesting to see how they go. I don't think they're going to do well if they keep these protests going and everything. So we'll see how next year goes.
Now, as I mentioned, Labor holds no seats north of Brisbane, and the Adani mine in central Queensland, all of those seats in central Queensland, there was like 10% swings to the LNP, One Nation and Clive Palmer's party polled well. And then, of course, in North Queensland, central North Queensland, that's Katter country. And there's now a push for North Queensland to become a separate state, which is driven in part by the Katter party, but certainly I think a lot of central Queenslanders would like to be part of that state as well, because there is such a demographic shift to the southeast, and it's becoming more urbanized, the state. And so you have two basically different parts of Australia, basically. And it seems that because we are a federation and each state does have a separate culture, and I fully support another sovereign state, the people of North Queensland. They shouldn't have to put up with Jackie Trad calling the shots. And I know that Matt Canavan, the Federal Resources Minister, he's certainly indicated not total support, but he's certainly like, this is something we should consider.
Yeah, it is we support it as well. We believe that it's a good approach to take. And a lot of people, especially North Queensland, they do see a lot of funding going down to the cities, especially Southeast Queensland. So that's why this push is going. So they become their own state, create their own economy, and start making the lives up there better.
Now, the state is just called, the proposed name at the moment is just North Queensland. I actually came up with a name the other day myself. I think it should be called Kingsland.
Yeah, Kingsland. I like that name too. I like to always say, because the king should be above the queen.
Yes.
Put it up above the north.
Yeah, so we'd be sending quite a strong message to the rest of the country.
Yeah, and then you could tell your friends and family you got some land up in Kingsland, got a house. Sounds nice.
Well, we're going to have a few kings soon in Australia, overseeing Australia.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, well, I'm talking about the British monarchy, of course.
Yes. It'll be interesting to see if they have Charles in, because he's quite an unpopular and very outspoken prince. I think it was in the original House of Cards, the British one, the BBC one, where in the second season
I
they
saw
had the
that.
king come in. Yeah, and he was supposed to be Charles, and he was quite a socialist as well, very pro-climate change.
And we all know how that ended, but let's not go on that tangent.
No.
Now, obviously, you've been in the military, which has obviously, it's called the Australian Defence Force, but most people think of the ADF as being deployed overseas to various disputes in most common ones have been in the Middle East over the past 20 years, but obviously I mentioned East Timor previously. Australia sent a lot of peacekeepers there, so it's not surprising that global geopolitics has pricked your interest, and now you're studying international relations at university. And you mentioned at the end of that video the core values that Kwasha thoughts. You've just launched the first episode of that about China, and there's three types of perspectives Australians have on China. There's a China bull, which is, we've had Dave Lee on this show previously. Here's what I'd call a China bull, basically that China is the greatest threat that we face to basically the security and advancement of our nation. That's something that also the outgoing ASIO boss, Duncan Lewis, said, that espionage basically meant from China, that is the greatest threat to our nation, even more than terrorism. And then, of course, Andrew Hastie, his op-ed talking about we need to recognize the threat from China and not fall into past mistakes. But you are what I'd call a China bear. You have a different view on what's going to happen with the People's Republic of China in the next decade or so.
Yeah, because I'm very critical of China, because when we're talking about them being the threat to the West, then we're talking about a complete change of the world order. So I tend to look very critically about who the next rival is going to be. And since in my studies, China has come up quite a bit during the course of my last year and a half or so. And I follow certain people, Brett Stevens and George Friedman, and they talk about China as well, but they're very critical, and they gave me a lot of this insight into it may not be as strong as it seems. And so that's when I start getting these ideas, especially the economy. It's more fickle than you can see, and the military. During my background, I look very closely at that, especially the equipment experience and the training they have. And I add it all together, and I see China not being as strong in the future and could possibly collapse in the next couple of decades. But then it always comes back to that nothing grows forever. So China's economy has been growing, but it won't grow forever, and it's slowing down very quickly, especially with the trade tariffs that we see with the trade war with Trump as well.
And it's one child policy that is also a ticking time bomb because of a aging population, and then of course because Chinese culture values sons over daughters. There's the whole other thing about girls being aborted and horrible sort of things like that. But there's also now a nation of Chinese male bachelors. And so there's going to be that demographic crisis.
It is, yeah, and that's one of the topics that's going to come up in my next video on Quash Thought is population. And big one for China is that's what I look at the big essence of what the population is going to do in the future. And with China, they've artificially affected their fertility and population in a way that it's skewed the gender rate so there's way more men than females. And there's this that 900 million labour force that's going to start shrinking if there's no more children in the future, because their fertility rate is way below replenishment. So they're already going into population decline at the moment, and it's predicted that they're going to lose 500 million people in the future, and that's going to shrink their economy massively when their population is a big part of the economy.
The other states of concern geopolitically, well, it's been in the news this week, Iran. They've been blamed for the drone attacks on two Saudi Arabia oil production facilities, and there's been the talk, will the United States go to war with Iran? There's certainly a lot of neocons in the Trump administration who would like that, such as Mike Pompeo. John Bolton's not there anymore. But I've looked at how this is played in the news this week, and I remember with the Iraq war, that was sold as, we've got to liberate Iraq, free its people, and anti-war activists at the time said this is blood for oil. But it seems in 2019 where everyone's being pretty blunt that this is about oil security. We are only going to go to war to basically make sure that we have fuel security, which, that's never a justification for war in my view.
No, it's not. And Trump, in terms of how he's been handling the foreign policy, has been quite smart in regards to how he's been handling it. There was a couple of months ago when that drone was shot down by Iran, and then he was about to do that strike against the country, but then he stopped when he found out how many people he'd killed if he did the strike, and he didn't deem the loss of an unmanned drone for loss of life. But if it comes to loss of life, particularly American lives, I believe Trump will react with force. But in terms of just invading for resources, it's never justified.
Because people always get freaked out when, because he had his tweet after the drone attack saying we're locked and loaded, and the Trump derangement syndrome is like, oh, he's become unhinged. But Trump treats approaches his role as president as a businessman, art of the deal. Most businessmen are terrible at politics, but Trump, because his whole career has been based around real estate deals, that's perfect for politics. And so he's doing it through Twitter, which is a new form of art of the deal. And so when he says stuff like that, that that's a deal-making move of his. And so as Trump supporters, we know that he's not going to basically nuke them. But I will say this about Trump, that he ends up doing the right thing, but he shouldn't have done the wrong thing in the first place. He shouldn't have hired John Bolton as National Security Advisor in the first place, and he shouldn't have torn up the Iran deal in the first place either. He comes to the right point of view eventually, but it would have been a whole lot easier if you'd just not done these things in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's a learning process for him as well, where he takes people on their word when he hires them. And it was interesting with John Bolton as well, when I kept reading reports and articles when he had him around as his kind of his threat in a way, and then he'll be because he knew, all the people that knew and all the other leaders knew that John Bolton wanted to invade, so he'd have him around as that kind of threat when Trump would try and create a deal. But it'll be interesting to see how the foreign policy plays out with him gone, and how that's going to play. But yeah,
there's been a lot of talk that the deep state. That's become a topic of discussion on the news and the internet in the era of Trump, because the United States deep state, it has well established foreign policy goals, and it seems that Trump, he's doing what he can to placate them so he doesn't provoke them too much. Is that something that you've thought about and analysed?
It is, because if in terms of if the deep state is there, that means it's very rooted and deep in every aspect of the government. So if Trump wants to really take that out, he does have to act smart in how he's going to handle that. So that thing of draining the swamp, he has to kind of figure out a way to expose them. And I believe that with all these issues, and especially the Democrats trying to take him down with impeachment and everything, that's kind of his way of drawing out the deep state and exposing them for the hypocrites that they are. So hopefully that goes well and it'll work in his favour, but it'll be extremely difficult to take them out in that way.
I mean, he has successfully taken over the Republican Party. It's now the Trump Republican Party. Like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, who hated him during the primaries, and they all said some very nasty things about each other, are basically two of his biggest spruikers in the Congress now.
Yeah, it is interesting how they all used to hate him. They didn't endorse him during the election, and now they all love him because they see exactly what he's done to the party, and especially a lot of conservatives.
Well, that's politics. You can hate somebody at one point, and then a few years later, you're best friends.
Yeah, that happens.
Now, obviously, what came up during the first 2.5 years of Trump's presidency was the threat of foreign interference from Russia, because it was widely reported in the media and suspected by US intelligence authorities that Russian propaganda and Russian online bots were wanting Trump to be president, because he always said that he wanted to get along with Vladimir Putin. And of course, there's all these conspiracies that Russia has incriminating evidence of him, including certain things that went on in a hotel room, which everyone knows what I'm referring to. So we had the Mueller special counsel investigation, which all it found was that members of his campaign met with Russian officials, but there was no collusion. But they, political operatives talk with diplomats all the time. There was no evidence of collusion, and it still hasn't been proved that Russia hacked the DNC and gave it to WikiLeaks. That's certainly what MSNBC, CNN say, but that hasn't been proved. And so I just want to get your assessment on the Russia situation, because it seems to be a US deep state fixation. I know that when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, with the shooting down of MH17 over Ukraine, Tony Abbott famously said, "I want a shirt front, Mr. Putin." And so, but that is sort of fizzled out now. So where do you see Russia on the geopolitical stage?
Well, it comes back to what they're trying to aim geopolitically. And if you look at what Putin's doing, he's essentially trying to gain back the old USSR states, the old Soviet Union territories, especially in Eastern Europe. But in terms of their economy and their population, they're in quite a similar state to China as well. They have a very powerful military. You have to give them that. And that's probably the biggest threat to America, not so much China's, but Russia's very technological advance compared to China. But the population, on the other hand, where many believe that Russia will never be a superpower again, one, because same issues that China's having with fertility, but also their population is extremely unhealthy, where a lot of them drink a lot of alcohol. There's a big AIDS epidemic up there. And if that continues, then their population probably will never recover. So what we're seeing now in terms of what Russia's doing is mainly attributed to Putin and his very strong-willed and ability to be that strong man. So it'll be interesting to see who comes after Putin and what type of leader they'll be. And if Putin remains the leader for a while, then he'll continue using Russia's strengths.
And that would also explain why Putin has introduced so many pro-family policies, because, as you just described there, Russian demography and its future are decadent.
It is, yeah. they have never really had a very strong family structure, especially during the Soviet Union. So him bringing in a lot of this now is him attempting to fix that issue, and at least for the foreseeable future. But in terms of if that will work is up for debate, because if you want to bring government policies to fix the family, although it does work sometimes, it requires a very strong economy, a lot of money for the government to implement that. Perfect example is in Australia, the baby bonus that we had under the Howard government. It did increase the fertility rate, but it costs a lot of money. And you have to ask the question, do you want the government to be spending that much money and create another bureaucracy to improve the fertility, where we can possibly do that with other things than the private enterprise?
I think the opinion on the right in the current year, because that was back in 2003, I think, the baby bonus. It's talked about the fertility in Western nations, and that the solution is not to increase local fertility, but to import more immigrants. And it was interesting that Tony Abbott went to visit Hungary with Viktor Orban, who has also introduced these pro-family policies, like including incentives to have large families. And it's been widely reported, Tony Abbott's speech, he talked about he's always been pro-family, and the best immigrants to a nation are the children of people of the local population.
It is, yeah, and that's why we keep seeing immigration is a temporary issue to that overall fertility problem, where it's just only going to delay the eventual decline. So the best course of action is to see what these eastern countries are doing, like Hungary and Poland, who are trying to create these family policies to be able to fix this issue.
Yeah, it's certainly that all Western nations are facing, and some are more proactive than others, such as I mentioned, Hungary, but a lot of, like, Australia doesn't know what they want to do about it at the moment, but it's talked about, especially in conservative nationalist circles, because our governments, it's a bipartisan thing that we need this high immigration number to basically keep the economy going, like a Ponzi scheme. And a lot of people are noticing this, and there's this underlying pressure that because obviously you're not just importing more Australians who are going to assimilate immediately. You're importing different cultures and religions. And that opens up a whole lot of other issues in Australian society.
Yeah, that's it as well, is that a lot of these immigrants also, if you look at their countries as well, they're going through the same issue. And currently it's mainly from countries like England and the UK, where they have fertility issues as well. But eventually that's going to slow down, and all we're going to get is from these countries that are entirely different culture to us. And the question is, are they going to be able to assimilate to our culture? And if not, then we're going to just create a lot of tensions as well.
Now, this is, as I've said, it's a bipartisan policy that we need high levels of immigration, or at least the Morrison government and Turnbull and Abbott governments, they want controlled and strict immigration. And it all started with Tony Abbott stopping the boats when he came to office in 2013, because Kevin Rudd opened the floodgates in 2008. 50,000 illegal people showed up on our shores, 1,000 drowned at sea. The detention centers on Christmas Island and elsewhere, Manus Island, were completely full, and everyone told Tony Abbott it couldn't be done, stopping the boats. He did, and Scott Morrison was immigration minister at the time. Then Peter Dutton took over, and now he's Home Affairs Minister, and he's basically been the hard, tough man of the government. Basically, we're not going to give any ground on this. We're not going to open the door slightly so the boats can turn back. And Peter Dutton, he's also called out a lot of the refugee asylum seeker fraud, the fraudulent claims, like he's called some of them Armani refugees, because they come on boats and they've got all of these expensive clothing, and they seem to have mobile phones, but they suddenly have no papers. And of course, the refugee, asylum seeker activists, they're always saying that he's the cruelest politician in the parliament. He's a monster. He's got no soul. He's a fascist. All sorts of horrible things. And they've been going after him lately about this Tamil family who settled in Billawa in central Queensland, and they found not to be refugees by not just Peter Dutton and Home Affairs Department, but by multiple courts. And there's now going to, they've been moved to Christmas Island, and the federal court has now decided that, I think it's the federal court, I should make it just, yeah, one of our yes, federal court, yes, has said they can stay in Australia until, because they've had children here in Australia, the 2-year-old, whether she is entitled to birthright citizenship, which is why Peter Dutton called them anchor babies. Again, not afraid of using the language there. But they're on Christmas Island at the moment, and of course the refugee activists say that they're locked up in cages. It's the same thing that's they've accused Trump of doing at the US-Mexico border, and that we torture refugees. And now, immigration is one of your work backgrounds, so you can obviously help debunk some of that hysteria.
Yeah, so I was a security guard on Christmas Island, and we saw a lot of the system, and they were treated very fine. They had rooms better than we did on the island. We had small, tiny little single room shared with another security guard, when they had these big rooms with TVs, Xboxes. They were given a card system where if they went out and played soccer or played rugby, they were able to go up and get Coke and candy from the canteen. And then they were able to have Facebook and internet as well. So they were able to talk to all these activists and these people who were very pro letting all the refugees in, and tell them that they're in all these horrible conditions, and they'll take photos. They had mobile phones. They'll take photos of themselves, where there's a story where there was this one asylum seeker on Manus or Nauru, and then he was speaking to a journalist activist saying that he's in these terrible conditions, and then the journalist looked at this refugee's Facebook page and found that he was taking photos of himself on the island, enjoying himself when he was tanning and everything. So it's a lot of misconception about what goes on the island, and they tend to say it's like all these cages and like fascist government, to end the debate and make it look like they're on the good side, so then they can end this horrible thing that's going on and have their agenda and have their way.
Or did you see any cages at all on Christmas Island?
No cages. Not at all.
I'm not sure if you've read the book Manus Days by Michael Coates. He worked on Manus Island, which was another refugee processing centre, and obviously that goes into a lot more detail. It's like a diary about what really happened on the island.
Yeah, I interviewed him a few weeks ago in one of our segments, and he's exactly the same. Manus and Nauru, all these people that come here, they're not there because they are seeking asylum. They're there because they broke Australian law by trying to come here illegally and using criminal organisations to do that. And he found that a lot of the refugees, they were hurting themselves and making it look bad so that they can get sent back to Australia medically, and they'll just assault all the security guards and everything. So it is a big issue, especially over there.
Probably, I thought the most blunt response I've ever seen from a public servant in regard to sort of these hysterical politicians about asylum seekers and refugees is Mike Pizzullo, who's the Secretary of the Department of Home Affairs. Obviously, he's in centre of controversy with regard to media freedom at the moment, but he was being questioned by Nick McKim in Senate Estimates one time, and Nick McKim said, "You've been torturing people, haven't you?" And he's like, "We do not torture people. The only torture I'm aware of is that we sometimes have to appear before these committees." And then Nick McKim's like, "I hardly think torture's a laughing matter." And then he basically says, this is why I call it a blunt moment. Mike Pizzullo says, "Well, basically, I don't know how to get through to you on occasion, Senator."
Yeah.
That's always something. There's so memorable moments that sort of stick out to you, even though they're a number of years ago. Well, I think it's probably footy time now. I'm not sure if NRL territory up there. Are you watching game tonight or?
No, not me. I'll probably be back to uni or something. I got a lot of assessments coming up soon, so.
Yep. No rest for you. Well, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. It's been really great conversation, and we've covered obviously local, Queensland geopolitics and philosophy. So it's been a great chat. And yeah, as I said, the live chat, they've absolutely loved you. So I'd love for you to come on again. And for those who are in the chat or who are watching this on replay, who'd like to know more about Young Conservatives Queensland or get involved, where can they go?
So we got our Facebook website. We're on all the social media, and we have our website, which is Young Conservatives Queensland. And we are hosting an event up in Brisbane tomorrow. It's just a nice social gathering up in Darwin and Co. It's a pub in Brisbane. But if they want to find out more, there's our Facebook. They can send us messages, and if they want to become an active member, send us a message, and we'll go through the process there.
And of course, what we'd all like is a national rollout soon of Young Conservatives, because as I've said, you've done such a good job in Queensland, and everyone's crying out for conservative networking, and yeah, you continue to go from strength to strength up there. So yeah, well, I think we all can't wait for the national rollout.
Hopefully, well, as soon as we have a working model, we'll start expanding as we have over the last couple of years.
All right, take care, and I'll leave all the links in the show notes page. Now I've got to transition the scene to back to myself, so I'll bid you farewell for now. Thank you so much for coming on, and yeah, keep up the great work, and yeah, good luck with your studies.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you for having me.
All right, that was a really enjoyable chat, and yeah, obviously Liam is, as I said, he's a very worldly. Oh, I've got myself back here. I've been able to have no technical stuff ups tonight. Everything's been so smooth and that, so it's been absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it's been a good live chat in tonight. Everyone's they haven't always agreed, but it's certainly provoked a lot of conversations. And yeah, it's only been a week long, this channel, and we've already got over 100 subscribers to it, which is very pleasing. Obviously, most of you were already subscribed to the main Unshackled channel, where I hosted my former program, The Unshackled Waves, but I wanted to have a dedicated show channel, but you've all made the effort to come over and subscribe to this channel and continue to see my newest production, so thank you for that. So make sure that if you haven't yet, you subscribe to this channel, click the bell to allow notifications, so that way you'll know when the show is starting. And also, please give a thumbs up or a comment below, and also share, because as you know, YouTube is cracking down on conservative, independent content. Because all the mainstream media outlets are now on YouTube. So for example, when you play a video, the next audio play is a mainstream media network now. So basically YouTube, the mainstream media have arrived. So basically YouTube is accommodating them. And it's just broken today that YouTube is unverifying a lot of conservative YouTubers. For example, Daisy Cousins today, one of Australia's most successful conservative YouTubers, she got unverified by YouTube because she didn't meet the new criteria. So it's important that you, the audience, help spread the word, share it with your friends. And of course, myself here at WilmsFront and everyone at The Unshackled, we are not alone. We've got a whole alt media online community now. We are in the process of basically setting up a prime time alt media lineup. So basically you never have to watch a mainstream media news report or show ever again. You don't have to listen to a podcast from a mainstream outlet. It can just be alt media all the time. So as I always remind you, WilmsFront is live on this channel 7 p.m. every Sunday, Wednesday and Friday nights Melbourne time on this channel. And then we have on Monday nights, that's when XYZ Live is on the Matty Rise Live channel. That is around 9:15 p.m. Melbourne time, although the joke is that Dave's always late, so they always start late. Dia Beltran's live stream, that is 8:15 p.m. Wednesday evenings, and she's also on her Dia Beltran channel. She's also setting up a Sunday night debate live stream, which is going to be on at 9 p.m. On her channel. Of course, every Thursday is our highly successful Uncuckables program, the Unshackles joint production with the XYZ and the Rational Rise, which it just continues to grow every week, which is so pleasing. We had another successful episode last night. That's on its own dedicated channel. Make sure you subscribe to that. And also my colleague, Steel Archer, editor-at-large, he's continuing to host Detonation episodes on the Unshackled channel. That's normally around 11 o'clock in the morning most of the time. That's when he goes live. A lot of his guests are from over in the United States, so that's prime time for him. And of course, the other show that I do is Trans-Tasman Talk, which is the Unshackles joint production with rightminds.nz. It's editor Due de Board. That's 7 p.m. Melbourne time on the Unshackles YouTube channel, and it's also on the Right Minds YouTube channel as well. So myself, I'm broadcasting 5 nights a week now, pretty much full time here. So obviously WilmsFront 3 nights a week, Trans-Tasman Talk Tuesdays, and then Uncuckables Thursday. So this is the first week of me being full time on air every night, and have to say I've absolutely loved it. It's basically because I'm now able to have a permanent routine now. It's not just waves episodes sort of at random times now. So absolutely love this week, and I've absolutely loved that everyone's getting into the show. And I've also got to give a shout out, in case I've forgotten, to James Fox Higgins for designing the graphics and the music, and Morgan Munro, senior editor of the Unshackled. You hear his voice at the beginning and the end of the program. Of course, we cannot do myself. I can't do this increased production. Neither can the rest of the Unshackled, XYZ, and the Rational Rise without the financial support of our fans and followers. The Unshackled has a membership program at theunshackled.net/membership. There is a web donation form at theunshackled.net/donate. We are also on Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal. All those links are in the description as well. We're nearly available, WilmsFront, on all the podcasting platforms, so that will be finalised in the next few days. And so that means that timwilms.com, the dedicated show website, that is nearly ready to launch. And of course, follow me on my own personal social media. I'm getting a bit more interactive in that, doing some just status updates rather than just posting content. So follow me on facebook.com/WilmsFront, twitter.com/WilmsFront, gab.com/TimWilms, and minds.com/Tim Wilms. Now, next program will be Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. My guest is going to be Dougal Cameron from Carnage House Productions. You would have seen him on Dia Beltran's live stream on Wednesday. He and his brothers, they're doing some great work over on that channel. They've got a lot of energy, and they've got a great formula and setup. They're really doing good stuff. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with Dougal, because yeah, he's a young guy, and he's very red-pilled, and so I'm certainly looking forward to that. So make sure you tune into that. And of course, I've decided now that Wednesday, so I don't go into Dia Beltran's live stream time, that I'm just doing that solo, so there's no guests who are going to delay me, so it's just going to be me. And so by 8:15 then I'll shut up, and you can all go and watch Dia Beltran there, because I think we should not cut each other's grass here on the alt media. There's enough competition in the mainstream media. All right. So thanks everyone for your company. And as I said, I'll be back Sunday evening with another show.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.